The warmth of his touch felt the same, yet something about him felt distant. I never wanted to be the kind of person who doubted the one they loved, but lately little things had started to gnaw at me. Ethan and I had been together for 5 years. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was solid, or so I believed. We laughed at the same jokes, finished each other's sentences, and had dreams intertwined like vines growing on the same trellis. He was attentive, loving, and never gave me a reason to question his loyalty. Till now. It started with the late nights. At first, they were justified. Work deadlines, last-minute client meetings. Understood. But then they became more frequent. Another late night. I asked casually, trying to keep my voice light as he loosened his tie. "Yeah, things are crazy at the office," he said, avoiding my eyes as he slipped into the bathroom. That should have been the first sign. The Ethan I knew always had stories to share about his day. But now, details were vague, conversations clipped. Then there was his phone. Once left carelessly on the couch or bedside table. Now it was always face down, notifications silenced. I dismissed the worries at first. After all, we trusted each other. We had built a life together. But doubt has a way of seeping in like a slow poison, tainting even the happiest moments. One evening, while he was in the shower, his phone lit up beside me. A message preview flashed on the screen. "Can't wait to see you again." My heart lurched. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to breathe. Maybe it was innocent. Colleague. Friend. But why did my stomach churn with unease? I didn't check his phone. I told myself I wasn't that person, the kind who snooped and made accusations without proof. Instead, I waited for him to come out. "Who messaged you?" asked, keeping my voice steady. Ethan barely glanced at me. "Work stuff. Nothing important." Lie. I knew his tells. The way his jaw tightened slightly when he wasn't being truthful. The way he avoided eye contact just a second too long. I wanted to push, demand answers. But I held back. Because if I did, I couldn't take it back. If I was wrong, I'd be the one ruining what we had. And if I was right, I wasn't ready to face that. So I swallowed my suspicions, forcing myself to smile, forcing myself to believe the man I loved wouldn't betray me. Even as doubt coiled itself around my heart, whispering that the perfect illusion was beginning to crack. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But once doubt takes root, it spreads like wildfire. Ethan became more guarded. His phone was always in his pocket, always on silent. I started noticing how he'd step away to take calls. His voice low, his tone different. He wasn't cold toward me. If anything, he was more affectionate, almost like he was overcompensating. "You've been so stressed lately," he said one night, pulling me into his arms. "Maybe we should take a trip, just the two of us." Trip. Distraction. I wanted to believe it was because he loved me, because he wanted to fix whatever was slipping between us. But a small, insistent voice in my head whispered that guilt was a powerful motivator. I confided in my best friend, Sarah. She listened, her expression unreadable as I laid out every detail. "Have you checked his phone?" she asked. I shook my head. "I don't want to be that person." She sighed. "Then what do you want? Because if you ignore this, you'll never stop wondering." That was the problem, wasn't it? I was already wondering. Already noticing things I never would have questioned before. The way he left early but came home late. The unfamiliar perfume on his jacket that wasn't mine. The sudden gym membership, though he'd never cared about working out before. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he really was just busy. Maybe I was looking for problems that didn't exist. Then I found the receipt. It was in his jeans pocket when I went to do laundry. A dinner for two at a restaurant we'd never been to. A date 2 nights ago, when he told me he'd been stuck in meetings. My hands trembled as I held the flimsy piece of paper. Proof. I stared at it for what felt like hours, my mind racing. I could confront him now, demand answers. Or I could wait, gather more evidence, be sure before I burned everything to the ground. That night I watched him closely. He smiled, kissed my forehead, acted like nothing had changed. But something had. He knew. And now I needed to know everything. I couldn't pretend anymore. The doubt had turned into certainty, and I needed the truth. Ethan had an office party that night. At least that's what he told me. I acted normal, kissed him goodbye, and waited. The moment he left, I grabbed my keys and followed him. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. His car didn't go toward his office. Instead, he pulled into a quiet restaurant on the other side of town. Not the kind of place for a corporate event. I parked at a distance, heart hammering, watching as he stepped out. And then she arrived. A woman, younger, effortlessly beautiful. She walked up to him like she belonged there, like she belonged to him. He smiled, leaned in, kissed her like he hadn't just left me at home. I felt my breath leave my body. It was different from suspicion, different from the tiny doubts that had kept me up at night. This was real, undeniable. I didn't know how long I sat there, watching them laugh, hold hands, exist in their own little world. Every memory, every moment we had shared, felt like a cruel joke. By the time I made it home, I was shaking. The confrontation wasn't planned, but the moment he walked through the door, I couldn't hold it in. How was the party? My voice was steady, too steady. He hesitated. Good. Long, tiring. I pulled the receipt from my pocket and placed it on the table. Was she tiring too? His face drained of color. He looked at the receipt, then at me, and for the first time I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. Let me explain, he started, but I was already backing away. There's nothing to explain, I whispered. He reached for me, but I stepped out of his grasp. Every part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask why. But I realized then that it didn't matter. The damage was already done. Ethan tried to talk, but I didn't want to hear it. There was nothing he could say that would make this better. No excuse, no apology, no justification. The betrayal was already carved into me, and no amount of words could erase it. I didn't mean for this to happen, he finally said. I let out a bitter laugh. You didn't just fall into an affair, Ethan. You made a choice. His jaw clenched, as if he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Maybe because he knew I was right. Maybe because there was no point in lying anymore. Do you love her? Yes. He hesitated. That hesitation was enough. I turned away, forcing myself to breathe. The weight of it all crashed down on me at once. The late nights, the lies, the way I had convinced myself I was imagining things. I had wasted so much time trying to believe in something that was already gone. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, voice low. But you did, I replied. And now I have to live with that. He didn't try to stop me as I walked away. Maybe because he knew there was no coming back from this. The next few days passed in a blur. Packed my things. I didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't let him see me break. I refused to give him that. Sarah helped me move out, her presence the only thing keeping me from collapsing. You're stronger than this, she told me. Stronger than him. I wanted to believe her. Ethan reached out a few times. Text. All. An email filled with apologies that meant nothing. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because he didn't deserve to hear them. Closure wasn't something he could give me. It was something I had to find on my own. Weeks passed, then months. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but it lessened. I found myself laughing again, breathing again, living again. And one day, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about him at all. That was the moment I knew I was finally free.